Hello everyone. Thank you for joining our Validator demo today. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes. We've got some more people just joining, so we'll give them a chance and we'll start in just a couple of minutes. Okay, welcome everyone to our Validator demo and discussion, all about automating our data QA and building trust in our data within our organizations. Just a short thing on good hygiene with the Zoom software we're using. If you have questions, there's a Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that and pose your questions in there, that way we can respond to them and everybody sees the answers we put through. So without further ado, let's move on to our discussion. So firstly, for those of you who haven't met Teknion or know who Teknion is, we're a full service data solutions consulting firm, been around for a bit over 20 years, based in Dallas, Texas. And a lot of our projects have involved considerable data analytic problems at companies. And one of the problems we were consistently facing was data quality. And so when people were asking us to build analytic systems for them, or data warehouses, reporting systems, dashboarding systems and things like that, time and time again, we ran into the problem where data was not of good quality. And that compromised the whole project, and it made it very difficult for people to invest in these solutions without being able to say to their end users, we have good data quality. And so that's where we came up with the Validator tool. We have 4 practices with it within Teknion. We have a data pipeline practice. You might think of this as your sort of traditional ETL data warehousing practice. We have a data visualization practice, which is around tools like Tableau and Power BI. This is about getting data onto end users' desktops. We have a data science practice. So data science is less concerned about what happened yesterday, but it's using yesterday's data to help us predict tomorrow. We have a crazy PhD statistician we stole from a university who heads up that practice. So we're very excited about that. We also have a data governance practice, and this is where the validator piece fits in. So data governance is about ensuring that everybody knows where their data is coming from, what's happening to it, what its origins are, can we audit it, can we prove what's going on. We have wide industry recognition from several of the software vendors. So we have Warescape. These guys are a data warehouse automation software. We have Alteryx, which is desktop blending, Snowflake, which is cloud database, cloud data warehousing, and Tableau, which is, of course, desktop visualization. So one of the things that drove the whole idea behind the Validator product is one of these stats, which Gartner had came up with. And they basically said 3/4 of companies believe they lost revenue because of inaccurate or incomplete data. So not just that they had problems with trust in the data, but they're losing money because their data is wrong. And to make it even worse, only 1 in 3 business leaders say, 2 in 3 business leaders actually have any trust in the data that they use to make decisions. And so this is a problem for us as IT professionals. We're responsible for getting good quality data into the hands of our users so they can make decisions. And how do we build this trust? And it leads us to this next question of, is your data trustworthy? It's a little bit rhetorical, but something to reflect on. And the next question it leads to is, how do you know your data's trustworthy? And that leads to a question of, do your business users agree with your assessment of how trustworthy your data is? Does it matter? Now, some organizations, it's absolutely critical. You know, your data has to be perfect to the penny. Other organizations, near enough is close enough. So this is an important question. Does it matter? And then finally, what are you going to do about it? And what you're going to do about it, it really starts with identifying what quality data is and what it looks like for your organization. And maybe just for a bit of fun, I know we mentioned in the invite that we would have a little giveaway of a gift card. Rachel, can I get you to pop up a poll? And so we've got some gift cards to give away to just random people who respond to our poll here. Just a little bit of fun, but just a question around, does your organization trust its data? And so are you in the camp of our users don't trust our data and we have no way of tracking that? Maybe our users don't trust our data, but we've got some processes to try and fix that. Maybe they do trust our data, but we have no way of proving to them that it's actually good data. Or maybe you live in a utopia where users trust your data and you've got good governance processes. So just click on one of those, and after the webinar, Rachel, who's our webinar coordinator, she'll organise getting gift cards out to, I think we have 4 to give away. Okay, Rachel, do you want to show up the results of our poll? Okay, so this is actually very, very comforting because so most people are trying to fix the data quality, and this is good. And so what we're going to talk about today is how do we improve the processes? How do we put things in place so that we can improve trust in your data? Excellent. Okay, Rachel, we can close that. Now, before I launch into what's Validator, what's the tool that we're going to be looking at today, I just wanted to talk about what is data quality. And the reason is data quality means different things to different people. And so I'm just going to cover the way we look at data quality at Teknion. And this might also help you in your organization understand elements of data quality. So the first one, we use this CUVCAT. You see at the beginning, CUVCAT. We use that as a little mnemonic to help us remember. So the first one is completeness. So this is saying, do you have all of the data? So if I'm bringing data from perhaps an operational system into, for example, a data warehouse, do I have all the records? If there's 1,000 invoices in the source, do I have 1,000 invoices in my target? It might not. It might also be about sums. Is my sum of my general ledger balances in my source the same as it is in the target? The second one is uniqueness. Am I avoiding duplicates and am I avoiding gaps? So this is about what we call about the grain of the data. I'm not creating Cartesian product that when I have a single invoice in the source, I have that's only one and only one in the target. The third one is validity. Now this is about, does data fall within the bounds that we expect data to be? So for example, let's say we're reporting out of the mainland USA and we expect 50 states. If I'm getting more than 50 states, then my data is not valid. So I want to be able to test with the known reference data, is my data falling within an acceptable range of values. Number 4 is consistency. Now this is about when I make changes to my systems, perhaps when I add a new subject area to a data warehouse or something like that, am I breaking anything else? Am I breaking something that somebody else has already built, some other workflows, so that my data is consistent as I make changes and as I deploy these changes into production? Number 5 is accuracy. And this is about the data being correct and particularly around transformed data. So if you're calculating metrics or other KPIs and things like that, are those metrics being calculated correctly? And sometimes you can have heuristics which can help. So for example, you might be calculating metrics around a CRM and you're breaking customers into perhaps different types of customers, and you expect the numbers of those, you know that there's going to be 10% of type 1, 20% of type 2, and if those numbers vary wildly, you want to know because your business rule that calculates the category of customer may be drifting over time. And finally, number 6, timeliness. Are we getting the right data to the right people at the right time? A lot of people forget about timeliness as being part of data quality, but we consider that to be important. And so when your data adheres to CovCat, if you like, these 6 items, then you know that your data can successfully support your business strategy and you can build trust. Right, so let's look at Validatar, which is our test automation tool. So what is it? So Validatar exists. This is our mission, our vision. Validatar exists to help organizations improve data quality and trust by automating the discovery, testing, and monitoring of data assets. So whatever those data assets are, tables, files, reports, etc., we want to be able to automatically say that it is trustworthy and we understand the quality. Now, architecturally, so it's a data test, data QA automation tool. Architecturally, the user interface is a browser. There is a metadata repository which contains definitions of the tests. There's a test execution engine, and there's a scheduler if you want to run them asynchronously. So this executes the tests against whatever source we're testing the test against. And then finally, there's a metadata repository of the results. So when I run a test, there's a result of that test. I want that stored as well. So that's fundamentally, from an architecture point of view, that is what the tool does. Now, let's look at some use cases. So on the left here, we've got some standalone. If you're just using Validatar, we'll talk about the right-hand side in a second. So the sort of things that people will use Validatar for are things like source to target data validation. Have I loaded all the records? Do the sums match? Is my incremental loading everything that it should do? I'm not loading it twice, and things like that. Number 2 is data quality monitoring. So executing a lot of that CovCat stuff we were talking about just a couple of slides ago. So this is about saying, is the quality of my data, is the values in my data what I expect them to be? Business rule testing, we've talked about. Now, compliance monitoring, this might be, for example, this is about your environment. Let's say you're running something like Snowflake, a cloud data warehouse database. And these cloud databases, they consume credits, they consume storage, you pay on a per use basis. I would like to know that how much credit I'm consuming. Maybe I'm charging it back to other departments. I want to test that nothing is going haywire, that I'm staying within the guide rails that my system should be behaving within. Then another use case is cloud migrations. Let's say you're a traditional on-premise SQL server, or maybe you're using an appliance like an Atiza or a Teradata, and you say, you know what, our organization would like to move to the cloud. I'm going to lift and shift my data warehouse, perhaps, or my reporting database to the cloud. How do I know when I've moved it that the cloud version, my Azure or my Snowflake, matches my on-premise system? So I need to know that the data is identical. If I can't prove that, my users are not going to sign off the cloud migration. Now, if you are, and I don't know if anybody on the call falls into this category, if you are using Warescape as your ETL tool, so Warescape is a data warehouse automation tool with a metadata engine behind it. We've got a plugin we've built to that, which uses the Warescape metadata to automatically generate a bunch of tests. So if you are using Warescape, there's a whole pack that we have that you can purchase for Warescape automatic testing as well, at all around looking at the metadata and things like that. So I won't go into detail about that here, but if that interests you, talk to me later and we'll talk in more detail there. A quick look at pricing. This always comes up with people, so I like to get it on the table very quickly. There's basically 3 levels. You've got Validator Pro, which is a small team, Validator Team, which is a mid-sized team, and then Enterprise if you have a large amount of testing that you're doing. And it basically works on how many people are creating tests and how many connections are you connecting to. So if you have a relatively stable set of sources, maybe you've got a couple of ERP systems, a CRM and a financial system, and maybe you've got a couple of data warehouse connections, the small team is going to be fine. If you have a much more diverse system where you've got all sorts of data sets all over the business, you're acquiring new data sets all the time, lots of people are writing tests, then you might want to consider the larger team size here. So that's how the pricing works. It's an annual subscription. Let's take a quick look at the where you would use this. Now I'm looking at this in a data warehouse context. I understand not all of you will be data warehouse users, so you might be using this in an operational context or a data lake or a data store. Whichever context you're using, it tends to have a very strong use case in the data warehouse, but also will have use cases. So if this is the standard data warehouse architecture, where would you use Validator? We could use it at discovery. So I'm looking at my data sources. I'm looking at as I load data, have I got everything? What am I loading? What sort of data is it? As I do my development, am I loading tables correctly? Are my transformations, are my business rules being calculated correctly? Also, am I breaking anybody else's work as I build? Or am I breaking anything I've built before? User acceptance testing. So I've now built something, I'm putting it in front of a user and they want to run some testing. They want to compare that not just what I've built now, but they want to make sure that everything else they've tested in the past is still valid. So I want to be automatically able to say, have all my other tests also have all my other tests, whether they've also passed a success or failure or not. Okay, and then the final one is production and monitoring. So this is about, now that I have my solution in production, and I want to run my ETL processes, maybe I run it overnight, and at the end of my ETL process, I want to run my test validations to say, does the data that I've loaded, does it meet my quality requirements? I want to be able to certify it before my first users start using it at 8 in the morning. And so that's a critical part of data quality as well, not just my development process, but my production process. When I run this thing every day, is my data still good? Can I tell my users, can I prove to my users that it's still good? All right, time for a demo. Let's go and have a little look inside Validatar. Let's pop up Validatar here. So this is the web browser, the front end, as you can see. We have different concepts of tests and jobs and connections, and I'll walk through these as we go. We break the world into projects, and so you can secure projects for different purposes and different people, just an organization. So I'm going to start by looking at a test. What is a test? So a test at its most basic form, let's pick a very straightforward one here, a source to target validation. I want to check that the sum of quantity is the same between a table in my development environment and my target testing environment. So a test is one of two types. It's either a single value test or a multi-value test. So am I comparing one value against another value, or am I going to compare a set of values against another set of values? And then we have a success criteria. What is my tolerance for success? Do I need it to be exact, or can I allow it to be 5% out or something like that? So this is a very simple test. It's a single value test. I have a zero tolerance for it. I set up two connections. Where am I testing? In this case, I'm looking at our Teknion Snowflake instance, my development and my test environments. And a test is composed of a snippet of SQL. So at the moment, this is something that you would write yourself. We've actually got features coming in the roadmap in the next versions to actually, for some standard testing, automatically generate the SQL for you. But in this case, we're just saying, look at this table, select the sum of quantity, similar code over here, but for a different connection. So very straightforward test. Now let me run the test. Confirm my connections, I'm good with that. I can run it interactively to the screen, or I can say store the results in the test repository metadata. So for now, I'm just going to run it to the screen, and it goes off. It runs the two queries against the two different systems, and it comes back and it says, you've passed the test, the match was identical, and there's my values. And I get some other metadata values up here. Who ran the test? When did it run, etc., etc. Okay, so that is the anatomy of a test. Every test you run is going to be SQL against SQL. The connections are either going to be ODBC, OLADB, or native SQL Server. So any of those options will work just fine. Let's look at a slightly more complex test. Perhaps let's look at a primary key, foreign key match between two tables. Now the difference here, so we're going to look and see whether nations and regions, whether the foreign keys are the same there. So this is a multi-value test. Instead of a single value I'm going to compare two sets of values. Again, I want an exact match, but I have a further set of criteria now. Overall, how many of my tests, given that I'm testing a set of values, how many do I accept to fail before I consider the whole test to be a failure? In this case, I'm going to say none. So the SQL is a little more complex here because it's a set of values. You now see we've got a group by clause, but the principles are the same. Let's run our test, run it to the screen. Hopefully we'll only take a moment. That's running it against the cloud database, and the cloud database is in a different region to me. So here we go. So it's failed. 20 out of the 25 passed, but 5 failed. And I can sort here. Here's my failures. Looks like the Middle East region, for some reason, wasn't in one system, but it was in the other. So there we go. It's a more complex test, and it's a multi-value test. We actually have functionality coming which allows you to do enormous testing. I think there's talk about being able to test like billions, sets of billions of rows against each other, which we'd never ever come across someone wanting to test until recently, but that's coming. So that will be quite exciting. Okay, so now that I've got a test, now I have the concept of being able to say, well, what about if I've got lots of tests to run? How do I create jobs, which are combinations of tests, to be able to run on a schedule? So on the left-hand side, here's my folders, here's my tests. I pick the tests I want, I push them across to the right-hand side, and these are a set of tests that I want to run in my job. So these are going to run as a set. I can set up a schedule. And so here's my schedule here, and I might say, what is my frequency? Perhaps it's daily, weekly, monthly, something like that. How often does it run? When does it run, etc. Send a notification, perhaps when there's a failure. Otherwise, don't send me anything at all. And the notification would be an email. Okay, so that's the job and the definition of a job. And then we run the job, we can also capture all of the results. So the results are all run into a metadata database. And so here's a set of ones that we've run at various points in the past. Let's go and have a look at this one. And it looks like there was 2 steps in this job. And well, this one here has had a failure. Let's drill into that and go and see what the failures are. And this one looks like it's a cloud migration test. And it turns out that of 271 tests, 259 passed, the rest failed. And so these ones here, for whatever this test is doing, looks like it's doing something with an account ID. It's saying these account IDs were not migrated correctly. Okay, so that's jobs and tests and results. And that, in essence, is the core of Validator. There's things around security and how you can secure types of tests and types of data and have different user roles and things like that. But that, in essence, is the fundamentals of the Validator product. Okay, let's take questions and people's reflections and thoughts, etc. Use the Q&A panel in the Zoom chat, and we'll take questions from what people are seeing and what their world looks like, and etc. Okay, so a question here about is this useful for everybody or just the QA team? We've had examples of both. So some organizations have separate QA testers, and this is their function outside the developers and as part of the operational team. Other people make this part of their a function that everybody in the in IT, or particularly in the data world, uses. So a data warehouse developer, a DBA, an operations person, even data modelers will all be using Validator. So it just depends on the way you structure your team, but either can work. Okay, the good news is that this webinar has been recorded, and we'll send everybody a link to the recording when we're done, so you can watch it again at your leisure. And if you've got more questions, you've got my contact details on the screen there. Myself or one of my team would love to reach out to you and talk further. And hopefully this is something that you can find valuable to add to your data world to improve trust in your data. Okay, in the absence of any questions, we'll call this good, and thank you very much everyone for your time.